All right, great. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We're going to kind of introduce ourselves. I'll go first. First of all, my name is Elise Jackson. I have worked and coached within the Arlington area for about 8, going on 9 years now. I originally am from Pennsylvania, but went to University of Delaware, where I first started playing Frisbee back in 2008. Of the many hats I wear, I not only coach Ultimate Frisbee, but I also sit on the Youth Ultimate League of Arlington board and also coach other sports like field hockey within the county. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. Opi, why don't you go next with introductions?
Right. Hi, my name is Opi Payne, or most people in Ultimate call me Opi. I went to University of Pennsylvania, which is where I started playing Frisbee with Venus in 2007. And I played on Scandal, the DC women's team, for 5 years, some of the more formative years of my Ultimate career. And yeah, I think that's it. I currently play for Fury, and I live in Oakland, California.
AJ or Antoine, yeah.
I'll go. My name is Antoine. Most people call me Twan. I'm from Arlington, Virginia. Dave Stoll is actually my first Ultimate Frisbee coach. I've been playing for 11 years now, and currently played, I guess not currently playing, but played for San Francisco Revolver for 3 years. Won a couple championships with them, and glad to be here.
I'm AJ Merriman. I'm from Clark County, Virginia, and I play for the DC Breeze. I've been playing for about 5 years. I still live in Clark County.
Great. So tonight we have some main questions that we're going to be kind of going through, providing our own perspectives and, of course, adding on to each other's perspectives to give some insight. And then we will absolutely take any questions that you guys have, so feel free to throw them in the chat. We have a very devout Frisbee player named Lukeman who is watching this and helping us out with that this evening, so feel free to pose any questions that you might have for us. So up first, our first question is really what possible experiences of racism have happened to us or as individuals through sports, but specifically Ultimate. So I will go last in this, so we'll kind of go backwards. So AJ, why don't you start first?
All right, so I've had any one moment that stands out the most in Ultimate experiencing racism, but I think when I first started playing, I was always a cutter, and I definitely expressed a lot of times I didn't want to be cutters, and I had coaches tell me that I was a cutter. Just because I was athletic, but at the time I was not athletic. So I'd say that is my number one experience of racism in Ultimate.
Yeah, the continuous example that I see for myself is the no thrower call, and they assume by my skin color that I cannot throw, but it's funny that the past 2 years I've been given the green light on a fairly elite team to throw whatever I want. So
This one was hard to answer for me. I think in a lot of ways, thinking about racism in Ultimate is a lot about like deconstructing experiences that I've had in the past, and we'll get to this later in the conversation, but just this feeling of otherness and not being able to like equate or like figure out why there's a sense of otherness, and just generally I think Ultimate is, because it's played by predominantly white population, that the culture is very white dominant, and so I think I'm also biracial, so it's hard for me to pinpoint, where exactly that otherness comes from, but I do think that there's a lot that comes from ultimate culture in general, which is very white.
And this is where I will say, I think when we're talking about the construct of racism, we can really divide it into two groups. There is the overt, this is like what you see in your face, it's 100% recognizable as racism. As far as like past experiences in other sports, I think it was a lot harsher and a lot more in your face. I will never forget that the swim lesson back when I was in junior high, all the black and brown kids, including myself, were put in the group that was claimed that didn't know how to swim. The most ridiculous factor about all of this was my teacher, that instructor was the same woman that literally taught me how to swim when I was 6 years old. This was something that my mom was very, very adamant about, especially because she did not know how to swim. She grew up in downtown Philadelphia. Like, that was just not a thing for her. So she was like, nope, all my kids are going to learn how to swim. And so, like, that was a very overt example, even though it was just gym class. Like, that's something that just continued in other sports. But to Opi's point, I feel like when we're looking at ultimate, it's a lot more subvert and it's part of the overarching construct. So times where I was asked to or told that I should pair up with a person across the field, and it just so happened like that was the only other person of color, like that pairing. When we're talking about AJ, your point of like your ability and expectations, like people see a person of color walking onto the ultimate field and they're like, oh, you can jump really high. And I'm like, actually, I can't. I'm kind of fast, but I can't really jump. I'm not the fastest person. So having to kind of break past those initial expectations really is something that can be kind of difficult. And once again, it's about this mindset. And I think also when we're looking at it, we sometimes take this very personally. And so it's not, I'm not saying like any one team was worse than another or any one person was worse than another. It's just one of these things, no matter how many teams I've played for, it's always come up in some way or another.
That's funny, like the getting matched across the other person who still happens to be of color. I feel like there's like in practice, it often looks like, well, they're the other really athletic person. And like maybe that connection of like, oh, that in itself is a bias, and that like we think, or like whoever's making that sort of might be thinking in terms of athleticism, but not really making that connection in their minds, right? And often it's like that same action or incident can play very different for the player of color who's getting matched up versus whoever else, right? And like so often like these like parallel like scenarios are playing out at the same time. And like I guess that's what I mean by like it kind of just like permeates to the culture where like often it's not even like, I don't have like a list of specific examples, but you know it when it happens, right? But I think the other point that you made about like it being structural, one example that often sticks out in my mind, and it's not necessarily something that happened to me, so I guess I didn't think of it in terms of this question, but in 2016, when I was in London with the US team, we had just finished playing Colombia. And as teams do after the game, we huddle and we like vote as a team on the spirit score. And I remember there was discussion about like, oh, well, like when this happened, like there were a couple of times that like they were yelling at each other, and it just like it was a lot about like ultimately it was just about policing another team's behavior and policing how another team's player treats their teammates, their expression. And it's like I don't even know what was said, but so and most of their players speak Spanish, so there's also the question of like, do we actually know that whatever like forceful, aggressive sound that we heard was actually an unspirited thing? And what gives us the right to police that behavior to begin with? And I think often like the conversations around spirit of the game get really conflated with like forcing assimilation into a dominant culture, which is very white. And so like in that way, it's like you every time, like what possible experience of racism have happened every time I step in a sphere circle, right? Like that, it's just everywhere.
Yeah, just to touch on that in my own experience, as coming from a basketball and American football background, where a lot of my teammates were predominantly Black and Hispanic, and just our pregame, from our pregame warmups to our sidelines to after the game, we're loud, we're taunting each other and making jokes, and I feel when I bring that certain energy to the ultimate tournament, it's frowned upon. It seems like I'm being cocky. It seems like I'm being overzealous in a lot of ways. And it makes my fun, because it's like my fun, it feels like, yeah, I'm just being outed in the way I like to approach sports in a competitive atmosphere. And there's only after I had to have discussions with my teammates and like with leadership where I'm like cleared to like act that way. It was like, this is not my intention to make fun of you or like not, or like be in your face. It's just like how I have fun, and don't take my comments as me coming to you, because none of my comments are actually directed at them. It's usually directed at myself or my teammates in a fun way. But just because of the energy I usually get off, and I could usually be heard throughout the field, it seems I'm viewed as someone who is trying to antagonize bad behavior instead of having fun.
That's really big. That happens a lot, like all the time. I would probably say that that's my number one experiences with my energy. And a lot of times with spiking too, in that same regard, with whether spike is at anybody or not. But the same spike has happened multiple times with a white player and with myself, and the reactions were completely different.
I always thought that was like a difference between like women's and open, the like sort of pushback against sort of gregarious, I guess, is what you could call it, but that's surprising to me. Not surprising, but that is like, yeah, it's a cross-cutting thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I've been on women's teams where celebrations have happened, it was encouraged for us to be outlandish as long as it was seen in like a very silly sort of way. And so like I think this was like the hardest change going from, and I know that I'm not even remotely close to your three elite status. Like I'm down here, you're up here. Like I do not have scandal in my back pocket. Like I can't say that I have played on that elite level, but especially going from college to club ultimate and trying out for teams that were more intense as far as their goals, I found that it was sometimes hard to actually redirect how I was supposed to, by that team's ideas, celebrate how I should be focusing, how I should be reacting on the sideline. And it definitely is just a culture thing between team to team. But then again, once again, it was a matter of I had to really think about like what I was saying and like how I was saying it and how it was coming across, because I know that I have a facial expression that if I'm not outwardly smiling, I look like I'm just in a bad mood. And this is something that I think that a lot of people of color really run into, because if we're not smiling, then we're considered either angry, maybe threatening. And so people now have a lower desire to approach. And so this is where, once again, we see it go beyond just like the ultimate community. It's now going more towards the region, the state, the entire nation, as far as like how people want to or expect to interact with us. And so, I mean, even as a coach and as a teacher, this is something that I've had to constantly think about. But it's even more so, I think, sometimes with Ultimate, because there's just this like, oh, spirit of the game. Like everything's like, you can make your call, that's great. But if you're standing your ground and very serious, then people immediately think that you aren't listening to other people and you're just being rude and it's just misconstrued. So we can move on to the next question because I think it does partially intersect with what we've been saying. So the next question that we have is, how did you, as an Ultimate player, process being the only other, and how did you balance the two communities, meaning the new Ultimate community and your original community's reaction?
Yeah, I can go first on this one. So just coming from again, from a football background and basketball background, when I shifted, a lot of my people of color friends were kind of outed me for playing a white man sport, or and made fun of me, and a lot of ways just like stopped being my friend. When I made the transition, and that was at times like I felt alone, because I couldn't really come to my now white teammates to tell about that problem, right? Since I was the only other in this situation. And then a lot of my progress, and especially in the beginning years of my Ultimate career, was also, it was viewed as like, oh, you're just like, of course you can do these things because you're black. And it was it like, I didn't get credit for the things I was accomplishing. And was frustrating at times, and and I just turned it around to work even harder. But yeah, it is difficult to, I mean, yeah, of course it's difficult to be the other. And it's only recently, like I've been playing for 11 years now, and it's only, I would say last year I had like a good level of self-assurance to be myself. It took 10 years of it too. So yeah.
I think that's a really good point. A lot of my black friends didn't, they weren't down with frisbee. They didn't think it was a thing that I should be doing, especially because it's very different culturally. But I have always had, I live in a very like rural white area, so I've always had like my main community has been white. But coming to Ultimate, I feel like there might even be more cultural differences than just race, but that's like a bigger thing. But I still wasn't able to like mesh with my white teammates when I first started playing frisbee, and it's gotten better. But it's a weird thing being a person of color starting to play frisbee, because it's always going to be right now it's always a factor. Like when you go to pickup and you're the black player at pickup. And that, like, again, it's hard to like put your finger on what actual things are happening, but it's like the vibe is completely different. And it is just strange because when I first started playing, I was playing with mainly my black friends at school. So there were no there was nothing. It was our vibe. It hadn't changed whether we're playing basketball or frisbee. But then when I started playing pickup, it was completely different. I tried to bring my friends to pickup. They lasted like 2 weeks at pickup, and then it was just me and the guys at pickup. But then it's like I'm trying to articulate like what the hold on, let me look at the question. Like balancing. The balance was, it's gotten better, and it's good when you can have a dialogue, and the dialogue has gotten a lot better over the years, and especially now. But I'd say the talking about it and acknowledging what's happening is the biggest thing that I've done to balance the two communities.
And this is where AJ, I think you and I can we have a similar background. I grew up in Pennsylvania, like I said. I grew up about 30 minutes from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Now, for frame of reference, the county of Lancaster is known as being Amish country. But with that said, the city itself is also a very Black urban setting. But where I grew up was essentially the suburbs outside of Reading, Pennsylvania, which is also a very Black urban setting, but I was in the suburbs. The house where I grew up, the house that my parents bought, was across the street from cornfields. Those cornfields turned into suburbia. I can probably name almost every Black person that I graduated with out of a class of 500. I could probably list about 5 people that I knew were in my class from like kindergarten. In church, when I was growing up, we went to technically a German Protestant Reformed church. My family was the only Black family in the entire congregation. So for me growing up, I partially did have a Black community, but then again, I didn't. It was also, to your point, a point of intersectionality, because my parents worked very, very hard to get well-paying jobs. Both of them ended up being pharmacists. My dad ended up working at Aetna for something like 30 years. He worked hard enough that he was able to retire. And I would say I'm definitely a person that is an outcome of wealth. I did not have any college debt. Like, not many people at all can say that, whether we're talking white, Black, person of color, doesn't matter. And so this is where it was almost like I had 3 separate sections. Like, there was, yes, the Black community that I wanted to be part of, but so much of that Black community was also part of the lower income community. And so I was not able to really get into that community because they were all like living in the same area. They were all doing the same things. They were hanging out on the weekends. And then here I was on like a completely separate hill looking down physically on that area. And then going off to college, I went to University of Delaware, and Delaware in and of itself has a very dynamic situation with race, because Delaware is actually a very Black state. There's no other way to put it, but a lot of students of color from Delaware go to Delaware State. A lot of people who grew up in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and certain parts of Delaware, they go to University of Delaware. But with all that said, I still was able to assimilate and still had a chance to be part of the Black community within University of Delaware. And so this is where I started to see some of that intersectionality. And I'm saying all this to say, I think that now that I've played Ultimate for now going on 12 years, I felt like I ended up finding a niche with the people of color within the Ultimate community, because there wasn't necessarily a group of people of color outside of the community that I had really grabbed onto and had really grown up with and been part of. And so I think that's why I become very passionate about it, because I want more people of color to play ultimate frisbee, because I want them to not be others. I want them to be part of the larger equation. Of course, this is a very difficult aspect because, yeah, I understand why people would say, "Why are you playing that white person's sport?" Because that's as it appears. And once again, going to the dynamic change, I know that playing pickup, whether we're talking about playing pickup basketball, football, even soccer, and then switching over to pickup ultimate is a completely different culture change.
Um, my foray into frisbee is a little different than the rest of y'all's, I think. My like I for background, I was born in Tokyo and moved to Baltimore when I was 6. But then for a while, like through grade school, I spent all my summers back in Japan. So like growing up, like through grade school, I had a very like I had a very little relationship to my black side of the family. And I think, that's also like my parents divorced before I have memory of it. Uh, and my dad was never in the picture. And so like, for that reason, like, I think that familial tie was very weak. And my dad's black, my mom's Japanese. And my dad's family's actually from Delaware. They live in Newcastle. So anyway, so like I all that's to say, like I feel like my culture shock with frisbee was more along the lines of like, oh, you used to be really into track, but now you're playing what? Like what is this sport? It was more the general like frisbee is not a real sport kind of reaction. And in a lot of like I gravitated toward ultimate for a sense of belonging, ironically, right? And I like for it, the time that I gravitated toward ultimate, it gave me a lot of what I need because I was going through other like identity crises and going to a private university with a single immigrant mother. Like I do not come from wealth, and like that in and of itself is a huge culture shock. Like I used to have like my freshman year roommate was like the kid of one of those families who has a building named after them on campus, right? And like she'd come home with like $2,000 boots, and I'm like working maximum hours just to like be able to afford books. So it's like a very separate experience. And so when I found ultimate, it was like, okay, like here's like a bunch of ragtag like scrappy people who are just also trying to get by for whatever their with whatever their reason is. So I kind of like latched onto that, and I think it's only now that I'm like looking back on things and that I'm realizing how much of the otherness I kind of internalized it and like made excuses for just so that it would be easier to make peace with. And then like, because ultimately like I have to be successful socially in the community in order to get support out of it, right? Like you have to, there is an assimilation period, whether you're white or black or whatever, like just frisbee in general is a counterculture and you have to assimilate, but then the added, there's always all these added layers depending on, what your experience is. So I think like I was so focused on just like survival mode and just being like, okay, I got to get through college and I need to not be like, I need to have some friends. So like, I'm going to like dive into this. And I don't think it was so much like conscious at the time, the good and the bad. Like, I don't think any of that stuff, like, and I think in the moment, like like I leaned into all the good and just like trying to ride that wave and like just trying to find my like tribe or whatever. Cause again, like I just went through many kinds of culture shock at the same time. So yeah, I don't know, I guess like, yeah, the balancing, like I think the balancing for me looks more like internalizing the expectation so that I can like buy into that without, and like still like live with myself kind of, like there's that like turning your back on like what feels natural to you because like everything around you is sort of like incentivizing you to be something different. And I think that's like I don't know. I think that's a feeling that I have recognized in a lot of other people the more I like have these kind of conversations.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the point that Elsie was making, that that it's taken a while to like find like your niche, your small group of people that you really click with within the ultimate community. And it's funny that you do bring that, because I always find myself like, when I find someone I meld with, or um that just get along well with, they usually retire the next year. And I don't know if it's like bad luck with me or it's just like part of the culture. And I'm actually at this friend's house currently having this conversation, and he's it's and he'll literally say, I won't name him, but he will literally say there's like just like a cancel culture, and like he can't feel like he can say his piece within frisbee a lot of the times, and he has to police himself quite a bit um, in the ultimate community. And I found myself having similar views as him. He's like, I would say he's like over here, and I'm like over here in terms of that um, opinion. But yeah, it's I haven't noticed it until you mentioned it, that a lot of my people I click with don't play frisbee, or used to and don't.
And this is where I will say, I think when we're talking about like racism in general, so much of it is dealing with microaggressions. And so, like, I feel like as a person of color, so many times we end up putting like protective shields up so that those microaggressions don't actually sink in. It's not something that we feel or really react to, partially because, yes, we might deal with that coming into the sport even to begin with. But I definitely feel like, to Opie's point, when I was first playing in college, yeah, it was definitely that desire to have that sense of longing filled. And this is where I will say, like, yeah, I've played probably, I've lost count how many sports I've played. I literally have probably bowled longer than I've played frisbee. Like, that's my next. That's like, yes, I have scored. I have gotten over 200 in bowling. Like, I have two bowling balls. That was a spring break gift to myself. Like, so when we're talking about like other sports, yes, I've tried them out, and I felt like frisbee. It was just something about it, and this feeling of belonging was something that I felt almost right away, because there were definitely certain people in certain situations where I felt like they were giving me feedback and giving me help and talking to me and being friendly with me, not because they were seeing me as another, they were seeing me as like an actual person. And so I think this is where like other sports have really failed, but ultimate has been better. It's not perfect. Um, but I also know for a fact that if anything ever happened and I needed help, there are approximately 15 girls that I have known for a decade now from uh, University of Delaware that I could immediately text, and they would be like, "What do you need? Where?" Like, I can be there as soon as possible. Like, they don't live in the same state at all whatsoever, but I know that like there is a sense of like they are willing to drop everything and like literally fly from Colorado, drive down from uh, Pennsylvania, like Philadelphia, and come down from Boston, Massachusetts. Like, there is that like support system still there, but once again, it's still something that isn't perfect. So I guess with that said, we can move on to the next question. What are invisible obstacles that have prevented people of color from playing Ultimate? I feel like we have touched on this, but we can definitely elaborate more.
I don't want to talk for too long about this because I will, but money, it costs a whole lot to play Ultimate and people sleep on that. But if you want to go to camps, if you play a sport, you want to go to camp. If you want to go to camps, if you want to play club, if you want to play like during high school, you got to pay to go to tournaments if your team goes to tournaments. There's just a lot of money in Ultimate, and people don't realize that. Which, I mean, it is easy to miss, but it's there. So that's the main thing I would say.
I would add time you have to take off from work and having a job that where you get PTO. I think not. I think culturally, like it also costs money to party with frisbee, right? Like the social component of it is such a big component in college, and depending on where you choose to play or what level or how involved you decide to be after college, like it's a pretty big component outside of college, even if you do have a job. And I don't know. I think that part's understated. I think I've often have had to like just miss out on things because I can't afford it, and I also don't have teammates who look like me or, as far as I know, have the background I have. So I don't have the trust to be able to confide in a teammate, and so then that turns into silence, and then that turns into talk or guesses as to why so-and-so is missing this and that. And it's like, it really just comes down to like, I had to work, or I couldn't afford it, or I could scrape it by, but I'm going to be in debt and I'm going to hear about it. And I still don't have the trust to be like, hey, I know I owe you this, but like, here's where I am. And I think like that part, like I've personally had a lot of, that part is like hard for me to like process, because I think, the part of me then like pushes back of like, well, you didn't have to go on XYZ trip. You didn't have to like go to XYZ tournament. But then you get back to like, well, some people have to make that choice, or some people have to make that choice when others don't have to. And so like, even just like the acknowledgement that is a fork that a lot of people have to like come to, that even, I think that does not get talked about often enough. It's beyond just like the USAU dues and the tournament, the room board, of course, and like and like at different levels, right? Like the better you get, like you're super into the sport and you love it and you want to get as good as you can. Now you got to worry about flying to Europe in the middle of the summer and having to take 2 weeks off, and how am I gonna like, it's something that you have to make choices around all the time. And I don't think that that's specific to race, but I think, when you think about context, and like, we already talked about like some of us come from wealth, some of us don't, or whatever. Like when you think about the generational like gap that you're having to account for, like I think, I just don't think that gets talked about enough, or just really understood to be like such a pervasive thing.
Yeah, I mean, like just even thinking about taking off work, how many people of color typically are in positions where they can simply take off more than a couple of days. I realize that my profession, and teachers do work all year round. We're doing other things. Like I can tell you right now about the fact that I have 3 grad classes wrapping up this week and everything else to prepare for virtual instruction. Teachers do work. We don't see kids during the summer. That's the only difference. But when we're talking about ultimate, especially getting to that upper level, or not even upper level, just playing club, even if it is not considered to be a high level club ultimate team, like you still have to pay the team dues. You have to pay for a uniform. You have to worry about figuring out when you can take time off to do tournament trips, which even though they're Saturday and Sunday play, if they're a few states away, now you're having to potentially worry about taking off time on Friday. And now you have to walk into work doing your best job after maybe like, I don't know, a couple of hours of sleep because of the drive back, or if flying is coming down to it. And I think this is where sometimes it gets kind of misconstrued, because frisbee can be seen as like the poor person's sport, because all you need is a disc and 8 objects. It could literally be shoes to mark the field. But as things get a little bit more serious, and as it gets fast, just like pick up with your friends, that's where the price tag really comes in. And just being able to cut out that time. So many times I have kids, and I've noticed significantly more players of color can't make practices because they have to work, or because they need additional tutoring because they have to get A's in all of their classes, and they're like full IB students are taking all AP classes because they're trying to graduate with like a 4.0 so that they can get into a good school and get scholarships. So I think it's kind of this reverberating effect that we really see.
Yeah, just to touch on my own journey about my financial woes with ultimate frisbee. I probably wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't be in the position I'm in today without my earlier years with the elite mixed team in DC. At the time where I was thankful enough that the team in itself were fairly wealthy individuals filled with scientists, doctors, lawyers, and they would literally cover 2/3 to 3/4 of my of everything. And they just said, pay what you can, and as a person who likes to be self reliant and likes pulling his own weight, that's very hard to do. But they actually had to convince me to allow them to do this for myself. So and even as I left, graduated college and started to wanted to get better and better at ultimate, I still had to do like pretty dramatic things. Well, what people would consider dramatic life changes in order to be the player that I am today. And I had to live in a van for 9 months. I had to really consider like other options that I've never heard of any of my teammates, because none of my teammates have, since I've moved to San Francisco, have been Black. So I always, kind of going back to our last question, like that other feeling, like I can't even go to other people with this problem because my teammates don't even know of this problem, and I had to solve it on my own by researching unique ways to live and how to save money and pursue this excellence I was trying to do. But it seemed like my other friends were able to achieve without going through these hoops as well.
I think what you said about not being able to go to people is huge, and that's the cultural differences. Like when you got a new kid coming out and playing, and they're loud and expressive and doing all these things, and there's all of these things adding together, like that we've already talked about, and then adding to this problem, it's really big. Because I had teammates that I just talked to a couple months ago that I've known for a brick now, like a long time, and we just started figuring things out. And like I said, I couldn't play for a club team, and they were like, oh, why not? And it was a whole brand new conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I just, once again, so many times I think that things are just once again, just not seen and not known about, and not the idea of within, especially, I feel like it's definitely in other cultures, but I feel like in my own personal experience, Black culture, it was something that I especially heard from others. And yes, I would say that I kind of experienced it myself in a certain way, and I'll kind of go into that. But it was we don't have money for that, so don't even ask. And that does seem harsh, but once again, it was like, for me, I know it was far more extravagant, and it seemed like it was definitely different because even though I grew up with a family with wealth, we did not show it in any way. I don't even think I really fully realized or understood it until I was an adult. Um, like I could say like our family vacation spot was on Martha's Vineyard. And so to some people, they're like, wait, how did you not realize it? Well, it comes down to the fact that like, yes, we were going to Martha's Vineyard, but I thought it was lame. Like as an 8-year-old, no, I didn't want to just sit on a beach for 8 days straight. I wanted to go on a cruise. Like that was just like how it was. But with my friends, they were going on cruises and all these extravagant trips, like every break, and like they were getting all these new things. Like so they got like the Razor phone. I'm showing my age here, but like they got a Razor, and like I remember like when the iPhone first came out, and I had like this little beat up Nokia and like Motorola, like that, and I had to pay with it like using a track phone. So like my growing up experience was definitely with a sense of humility, like not necessarily being like, oh, like we have a lot of wealth, but that's also because my parents really were directing that to education and looking at the long term. But it was definitely a situation I knew I was allowed to ask, like if I wanted to try out a sport or try something out, that I could. But if the answer was no, like that was it. The answer was no. Um, did my parents really say no that often? No. I mean, they fully supported me playing ultimate frisbee, even though they had no idea what it was. But it definitely comes down to the idea, like there is a certain amount of money that families have, and being spending like any additional money on a fun activity is just out of the question. And I think that has been one of the things that as a coach I've really had to struggle with, because I try to convince these students of color, like, yes, this is a good thing, this is a fun thing, but then they have this like hesitancy to bring up the fact that they can't pay for it. And so this is why, like, I know with YULA we've set it up so like you don't even have to like approach your coach doesn't even know. It's literally done through a system, so it's a lot more anonymous. But I will say, as a coach of color, I've noticed that the players that were in financially strained situations felt more comfortable talking to me about their financial situation than going through a system. So I think that's where it kind of comes down to also that visibility and realizing that I am part of their other, so they have that level of comfort.
I think for you mentioned like visibility. I think that's another, like, that's not something that I have experience with as relates to ultimate, but you know, my junior year of high school, so one of the later years of high school, I decided like I'm bored of track. I want to try some new sport. And I distinctly remember it's like one of the more vivid memories I still have of like that time in my life. But like walking toward the classroom where the lacrosse tryouts were being held, or like the sign up was being held, like, or initial meeting or whatever. And it's like, of course, like all the popular girls, all the like, it was like soccer and lacrosse. Like, you know, there was like a group of girls who played all the travel teams and like who could afford to play all the travel teams and buy all the expensive equipment and be on the club team as well as the school team. And like we had a really good program, but you know, there's a reason for that, right? There's a lot of money behind that. And me, like I ended up sticking with track because track is actually like, I mean, in my experience, is much cheaper to play than frisbee. Like you literally just need shoes. And I mean, well, like, I'm oversimplifying, but anyway, so I gravitated toward track because it was the more affordable option for me. But after just a lot of seasons I was tired of it, wanted to try lacrosse, and I was like walking toward that classroom, and I like hear the noise from all the returners and all the friends like getting together from the season before, and I'm like my heart's pounding out of my chest. I'm like getting close to the classroom because I'm like these are all the popular rich kids in school, and I have to like I'm brand new. I have none of the training. I don't even have a lacrosse stick. Like it's supposed to be open tryouts, so really like how open is open tryouts when you have to bring your own stuff? So like, and I remember I walked past, it was like those classrooms that have a door on like each side, right? And I walked past the first door to like kind of try to get a quick view of like the demographic in there. Like sure enough, it's all the kids who like I just never felt comfortable. Like we don't even operate in the same circles, the same stratosphere, right? And I just kept walking right down the hall. I was like, all right, I guess track for 2 more years. Like, and I wonder, I have had some youth players say directly or explicitly that like they appreciate me as just another player of color or a woman in ultimate who's whatever. But I think like, and because I didn't have that sort of like visibility hurdle getting into ultimate for my own reasons, like I often forget about it. But thinking about like little me in high school and just like being completely scared to like jump into this new pool where I don't know anybody, I don't know what I'm getting into, I don't even have the map to navigate what is happening in this culture, right? And that culture can just be lacrosse versus track. Like there's so many layers, but I think like visibility is also it's super important. And it's one of those things that like people like when it's not there, it's like it's not one of those things that are easy to like explicitly talk about. But I think
and coaching against them that they're the most spirited team I've also ever met. They discuss each and every call. If they call something, they'll be like, did you think that, they're good ultimate players. They're very spirited, but they always get terrible spirit scores. And the only thing I can think of is that it's because they're loud and express themselves a lot. And they're not even that physical, but people tell me that they're physical a lot when they're like scouting them. And I'm like, but they're not. And I think that that's mainly because they're big black dudes. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like I kind of gave my like spirit of the game example. But yeah, I mean, I think generally, like, and I see a lot of circles that I'm like peripherally aware of in Frisbee talking about this. So, I think to the sport and like the community's credit, like there is a lot of conversation around like scrutinizing what we really mean by spirit of the game. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that goes somewhere, but I do think that like there are teams or players out there who still like take their role of and like self-officiating very like to heart in terms of spirit. And I think like kind of like I've seen a lot of examples of players sort of like self-appoint themselves as like this is what good spirit looks like, and sort of like evangelizing what they think is good spirit, and what it usually comes down to is like what they're used to seeing. And so yeah, I think that I hope that those conversations sort of escalate, and like we kind of like spirit of the game I think is a very racist concept in Frisbee, and like it's not one that can be sort of left alone or kind of taken for granted as it is currently defined, or at least as it is currently practiced.
I think what you said about people that really care about spirit and like spirit, they have this one picture of spirit, and really spirit is so much more than that. You can be a super physical, super loud player and be really spirited. I think there's not a lot of examples of other kinds of spirit showcased really, but they're there. And it's nice when you find them. I
mean, I feel like spirit of the game is like, it's almost like performative, right? like, or at least like the versions that I've been like subjected to, I guess, where it's like, did you smile on the sideline? Did you high five the other players? Like, I don't know. I'm talking to my teammate on the field. What do you mean? Like, I don't know. But like that shouldn't be the only measure of whether I'm a spirited player or not. It just like seems so ridiculous. But yeah, like, but there's so many spirit like voting circles that I've been in where like those points have been made. I'm just like, why is this such a narrow definition?
And this is where I will also say, like, I feel like, especially as a person of color, sometimes your knowledge level is questioned. So whether it's your input in the actual circle or when you're making a call on the field. And I think this is where it's like really, this is where racism can be really hard, because like how much of it is like you still learning and still growing versus you being a person of color, but it is also very much about perception. And when we were talking about these perceptions, like so many times, like you might say like, well, this person didn't seem as knowledgeable, like now they should be docked for like spirit points as like an entire team because of this one person. And like how many times is that person a person of color? Or if they seem like they were really aggressive in their calling, oh well, they should get marked down. But it's definitely what I call like one of those other systems. Like, I mean, if we're talking about like larger systems, for example, like United States as a capitalistic system, like at the core, like it is a racist system. And where it comes down to is like the capitalism of our nation was really based upon the fact that there were people that were being brought to this country to create things and they were never compensated for it, but they were creating things that were immediately going into the economy. And so this is where I would say, like, on paper, Sphere of the Game can be such a great concept, but then when you add people and their bias and their own perceptions, that's where the racism takes place. And so this is where so many times, like, and I feel like this is brought up in the book White Fragility, where it's really talking about like, just because I'm disagreeing with you doesn't mean that you should have to be immediately defensive. Like, we should be able to disagree without it coming down to like, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, well, like you're new at this. Like, we can still disagree about things.
I think one thing, are we still on Spirit of the Game? Okay, then I don't have anything to say.
Well, if you have something to add, go for it. Go for it.
Well, I'm using our like questions as a cheat sheet next to the video, and like, so like for everyone else's knowledge, the question is like, what are the invisible obstacles? And there's like examples of like Spirit of the Game or like calls being made, like perception of being an aggressor, lack of knowledge, cheers and songs, right? Like there's a lot of hip hop on playlists. There's also a lot of silence right now around Black Lives Matter in the Ultimate community. So you can consume Black culture, but if you're not going to come to bat for the people who produce that culture, that is a very, very large issue. And I think like I've become very skeptical of the Ultimate community, and I've felt very disappointed in the Ultimate community. And you know, like where I come from is on that is like, I think we are all products of the racist system that is America, and we're all products of the racist education system that is in America. And so like I think, you know, there's a lot that is out of control in terms of what we get exposed to and during, you know, that, or what we should be exposed to, right? Like there are books that are banned for ridiculous political reasons. There are important historical figures that never get mentioned in history books. There are statues of slave owners, right? Like it's all backwards. And so like I always come at this from perspective of like, I have a lot of learning to do. I have had a lot of learning to do just to like get up to speed. I wouldn't even consider myself up to speed. And, you know, like I'm not one who grew up listening to a lot of hip hop. Like I said, like I very much grew up feeling Japanese and like kind of distancing myself from my other heritage. And like it's just my introduction to Black culture was not through like the mainstream pop culture or the mainstream co-opting of Black culture, I guess. So then I don't have that sort of like consumption background, but as I'm getting up to speed, I'm sort of like exposing myself to more artists of color and sort of like kind of diving in. It's almost backwards, right? But then I think about like when I was in college, before I started listening to hip hop, like all the hip hop songs I knew were from the Venus playlist, and like, well, you know, like or you know, and not to single out Venus, but just like in all the teams, all the playlists that I've heard. And I'm also looking back now, or like looking through my timelines or whatever, and like seeing what is being said or not being said by those same circles, and like what that is like a reconciliation that I personally need to see from the circles that I'm involved in Frisbee. And I think until then, like I don't think that I'll ever feel at peace in this sport. Until that happens.
That's a really good point you made. I'm really into music. Sorry, Antoine. I'm really into music, but so I talk about it a lot, and I always try to talk about it with my teammates, and I can't. We don't talk about the same music. But then my music that I listen to pops up on the playlist before games, and I get really confused because they have no idea who the artist I was just talking about was. But then their songs on the playlist, and it's strange, and it's uncomfortable, and like I don't know how to bring that up, but that does make me feel uncomfortable, like in my home, which is the Frisbee community. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I feel like a lot of people, just in the ultimate community in general, has a sense of like they're on this high horse, and because we have such of a unique experience as a community, and that we're like also usually like the community is very well educated and generally progressive group of people. We are like have this sense of nobility about themselves. But to go on what Opi was saying, that like when it comes to actually showing up, I see very few actually showing up, and which is like frustrating to me because I'm a very like walk the talk kind of person, and I've had conversations with these friends and asking them why haven't they done stuff more than posting something on social media. Is because like they don't want to feel basically uncomfortable with to sum up the answers I've gotten. And if we're really like trying to be a community that's like growing, and not only like just growing, but like intentional growth and mindfully growing our sport, like it's going to be uncomfortable, and you have to be like okay with that. And like, yeah, just in general, I just super frustrating.
And this is where I will say, like, first of all, like it's not just on teams where I'm playing with people of my own age. Like I'm also a coach, and I cannot tell you what emotions I went through when I'm standing on a sideline that features a predominantly white team as they are blasting Kendrick Lamar. And it's just like this, like, once again, it's this like evolution of emotions. And like that, like I can't tell you how many times it's also been rap artists who swear a lot more and talk about things that are not school appropriate. So like as a teacher, I can be like, and we're turning that off. Like that's not going to happen. But like I've also had former players ask like, oh, so you're into Wu-Tang Clan? It's like, wait, like it comes down to this like automatic assumption, oh, you are Black, so you listen to this music. And yeah, it's partially true because yeah, there are definitely certain artists that I like I'm a huge fan of Drake, I'm a huge fan of Jay-Z, Beyonce is life, I'm definitely part of the Beehive, like that is everything. Like I literally played her entire Lemonade album on repeat coming back from a tournament with some of the girls in my car. Like that has been a thing, but it's also like we still need to address what this actually means. You can't just take different parts of a culture that you really like and then ignore the other parts. And so I think this is kind of like a perfect jumping off point because our next question really is what can, now that we've had this conversation, what can people do? And this is not just talking about players of color or families of color, but also those who are white. And what does it actually mean to be an ally? And like one of the things I think I read that has really resonated with me is the idea that being an ally is not a title that you can decide yourself, is something that is given to you by others. And so kind of going to your points about like it's about not just like posting things on social media, but it's also like self-reflecting and actually making changes in the things that you do, and even putting your money where your mouth is. Like this is where we can really start to see these changes and address the things that really actually matter.
I would add that it's also not a badge that you like earn once and like it's just like on your right. Like you can be an ally once and you can really not be an ally the next minute. Like it's not. I think it's a continually learning process. And so I think like I don't know. I don't have like a list of to dos. I'm sorry. Like I don't know, but I think like I've also been having a lot of conversations where like around like the idea of discomfort and like white discomfort, and I think like I don't want people to feel intimidated by this like how to do allyship right, just in the way that like learning, educating yourself is not like you read a certain number of books, you check off all the lists in the New York Times bestseller list, and like I got my second badge, like educated badge. Like it's a continuous learning process, and I think like, and it's not just white people who have to go through that, right? Like I have had my own journey of like learning, and I'm still on that journey. And so like it's not this like binary that I think like often results in people feeling uncomfortable, like oh they're like they like internalize this like oh I'm not good enough, I'm racist or I'm not racist. Like it's a living thing, and like you can like I'm sure that every single person on this video, every single like person watching this has like committed a microaggression that they had no idea about. Like there's no like sort of special echelon of people who are like woke. I really like I used to like be on the like woke train, but I've really come around to like being against that. I really don't like that sort of like you are either good or bad sort of binary.
I would like to say like I think it's great to like have these conversations with your friends of color and see how you may have mistakenly made them feel uncomfortable or just have not realized privilege that's been handed to you, but also like do the work of like self-reflection and like go through your own memory banks and like try to objectively like see the other side of like of your just your normal everyday actions with yourself and your teammates and well just in life. It's like don't. I had to have this conversation with a friend who was like, don't like we're saying, don't look for me to give you a badge saying you're all right, you did it. But it's more of like can't you can't give yourself the badge either, but like can you bring yourself to ultimately realize where you've been messing up, because that's like more powerful with me than me doing it, because then I have to do it instead of yourself doing it. So I would encourage self-reflection.
Treating other people any kind of way is definitely a personal thing, and it comes into a community. So we're talking about this in like a broad community sense, like all these things, but these are all individual things that you have to feel and change and understand within yourself. So I think that's a super good point, that you got to look inside, and that none of these things are necessarily based on anybody else other than yourself.
And I think like that self-reflection is something that's like huge. And you like with self-reflection, I think that there's no one right or wrong way to do self-reflection. Like for some people that might mean like literally shutting your door and not talking to anybody and like sitting there thinking things through. For me, I know self-reflection is really within reading. I mean, I'm an English teacher. Like I love educating myself. I love reading, like reading Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism in You by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi was like life changing for me. And there are plenty of other books that I could mention. Monday's Not Coming, Pet. Like there are just so many other books that really help within that self-reflection process. But I will also say that, like, once again, it's doing more, and doing more can be as simple as just your approach to a person and what you say, and recognizing like when you are out of line or when you do something that is considered a microaggression, and not just like automatically meeting it with um, like frustration and defense, like, but actually taking and listening to what that person says. And like, of course, there are other like great programs within Ultimate that have definitely popped up. Like I've been a huge fan of Color of Ultimate and Ultimate Peace, just to name a few. Like I think that they're really getting ideas flowing and getting the word out as far as like what is the benefit of having an open conversation, and also recognizing when things are not equal or not right. But I definitely think with the self-reflection, some education is needing to happen. But I agree with Opie. It's not like you can just like read a set of books and suddenly like, oh, that's it. Like you have to do more.
I also really like what AJ said about like ultimately it does come down to individual interactions, and I think that's where like the terms like microaggression comes from, right? Because it's like we're trying to like define, box in these like often untouchable moments that like if you're there and you're in it, like you recognize what it is, and if it's happened to you often enough, you're like you start making connections. But if you're then trying to explain it to somebody who has literally never like they're like my truth, your truth, right? Like if their truth is that they've never dealt with a certain kind of microaggression, then there's that like gap. And so yeah, like I struggle with questions like what is a like how has racism affected you? Because I'm like, well, I couldn't say, I'm not in the brains of those people, but I can tell you the accumulation of experiences I've had, and they seem to be different from the accumulation of experiences other people have. Or like when I express it and I get a look of like total like confusion, then that tells me something, right? So it's like we are all operating at an individual basis, and like of course, like just like deep, like basic humanity is a good rule of thumb, but I feel like what we're all trying to say is really just like it's more subtle than that, and you have to remember the context in which you're operating. Otherwise, like, yeah, this stuff doesn't look that serious. This stuff doesn't look like it's that big of a deal or that it's that prevalent. But when you bring in the context of it, then it's like, oh wow, like there's a mountain of things that like people are carrying with them that you don't understand. So I think that's another really good thing to think about, where it's like it's the, hey Elise, can you line up across from the other Black person? Oh wait, no, that's just like the most athletic person. Like if you don't understand the context of like how skin has been viewed in our country for generations and generations, that you don't understand how that plays to Elise, right? Like so, yeah, just like when in doubt, just like assume that there's a deeper context there, and like be open enough to like, and like brave enough, I guess, to like ask after that, and like be like, did I step in something? I don't know. Like if something feels off to you, like explore that, because chances are like other people are hurting and they don't know how to like bring it up.
I've never been upset with a teammate about who came to talk to me about anything. That's like the number one thing. And like if there's ever a question and somebody comes to me, I feel at least 80% more comfortable with them to at least talk about it, even if I don't like them. Like it's good. Conversation's good.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, you see me, like, oh, like you saw something, like thank you for seeing me. It's like that simple sometimes.
And sometimes it's even like having that other teammate just like speak up and say something like, oh, that's not cool, or like, oh, I think you should look at it this way. Like it doesn't have to be like this big thing where like, you know, you sit down with a person and you're unpacking racism for the next hour. Like it's the simple things, like it's the little things, like saying like pointing, oh, well, you're an athletic person, so match up with another athletic person that I think will fit your style. Like it definitely can be easily avoided and corrected. And speaking to that, I respect those teammates a lot more for that action. Because once again, it kind of makes me feel like even though I might appear like another on a team, I don't feel as alone. I don't feel as in isolation, because I know that people get it, but like they're standing up and recognizing where things are just going sideways. So that's it for the questions that we had set up. Once again, we do have a wonderful WNL player who's been listening to all this and also checking out the chat. So Lukeman, is there like one or two questions that seem like they were really good questions that we should be looking to answer?
Yeah, definitely. I think one or two questions actually from the chat at least is, one question, sorry. Yeah, so how can teams inside do better to become racially aware?
So that's
yeah. No, go for it.
So that's one thing that we're trying to figure out on Fury right now. We're like trying to have these conversations and like unpack racism. And you know, like at least from the Fury perspective, like we don't have a season, and there's the idea of like, you know, there's this money that we would have spent. We're a predominantly affluent team, and so we have money. And I would say like if you're in that position, or if your team is in that position, like put your money where your mouth is. And like if the goal is like activism, go put your money there. If the goal is like self-awareness, then go hire an actual consultant. Don't do it in-house. Don't be like, oh well, we elected you the captains to be our leaders, like that means like you lead us through. No. Like people do this for a profession for a reason. Like this is really hard and complicated work, and especially when you're trying to dismantle something in an already set environment, like an already existing team, I think that just like makes that work even harder because you're dealing with baggage from that team, right? So like there's so many ways that you can walk the walk. Like don't do it like frisbee culture. Another thing of frisbee culture is like again like ragtag. Like let's just put 10 people in the hotel room. Like let's just like pull things together. Like please don't do it in house. Please hire somebody professional to do it.
One thing I would say is go into our communities, do some volunteer work, experience our culture. Like it's definitely different from your typical frisbee tournament, but I think people tend to not want to do these type of things because unknowns are scary. But once you actually dip your toe into what we have to offer and actually get the full experience, it's not as scary.
Talk to each other. That's my only thing. That's the biggest thing that's helped personally in my experiences is talking to my team, just communicating, getting the dialogue going, that's not enough, but that definitely helps get it going.
And like once again, I think like self-reflection first needs to happen, but then that self-reflection can happen as a team. Like you already are making decisions for what your goals are as a team and like what you actually want to complete. So why can't you have a team discussion about like this as a goal, like how to be more aware and more in tune? And I do think like, for example, to Opi's point, I know that some groups really are recognizing that they are ill-equipped to lead this charge. I really have to actually give it up for WAFC because we let them know about this event and they're like, that's great. We want to let you know we are looking at a third party who is going to be looking at all this stuff and then coming back to us because we have recognized that we are predominantly white. So, but with also in that same respect, don't just look at a Black person or a person of color and just think like, oh, they got it, they know. Just because I am a person of color doesn't mean I'm an expert on race. Like it is something where like I know my own story. I am an expert on my own life, but I cannot speak to the entire culture or the entire race. And sometimes that happens even like on a schooling level. Like that's where we're reading a book and I was asked a question by the teacher, like, so what's your perspective? And why was I asked that question? Because the main character was Black. And it's just like, once again, you don't want to have to single that person out in that way. And it's that just is taking steps back. But I definitely feel like first self-reflection, then team reflection, but also recognizing what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, how can you start having these conversations in a positive way that's not just taking shots in the dark.
I definitely agree with you guys. I think stepping up is a great aspect of what we're trying to do here. And I think mainly if you feel comfortable, I think definitely step up. But if you don't, ask someone questions. Secondly, I think you guys mentioned a lot about how being Black or a person of color has limited you in the sport. But in what ways have you been able to embrace your Blackness or your like non-whiteness in Ultimate?
I mean, I feel like, and Opi, I'm going to use a situation that I have no idea if you actually remember. I think that when you come across one of those others, it just means something a little bit more. It sticks with you a little bit more. And the reason I bring this up, Opi, is I literally remember guarding you for the first time when I was at Delaware and you were at UPenn. Like, I still have that vivid memory, and I just remember, like, I'm not this sass. Like, why am I covering this person? But, like, I think that being a person of color, like, once again, it's like that inside niche. And I think that it has really opened me up to creating and having a lot of very good relationships with people. Um, and it has once again kind of created like this secondary community inside a community, because once again I feel very comfortable in being Black, but especially around these people I feel like now like there's just like this understanding, and in that understanding I feel like there's more support. Not saying that anybody is less supportive, it's just like it means more.
Yeah, just to bring in my own personal story. I remember the first time I played against Khalif Al Salam, and he'll also say this too. Like it was the first time I matched up with an elite um, Black Frisbee player, and it was honestly probably one of the most memorable games I've ever played. And just and in the same sense, I've matched up with Trent Dillon, and there's just a sense of camaraderie that automatically just happens. We don't even have to speak words to each other, and there's just a sense of like togetherness that we, especially when we see each other in social events, we like automatically gravitate to each other, and it's a wonderful feeling because, like you said, like it's not like we're our own secret society kind of thing. It's more of like I've, I've we've gone through very similar things that it's hard to explain sometimes, and we don't need to explain just because we just know. Yeah.
And just adding on quickly to that, like sometimes I feel like because of that, it extends beyond just the ultimate frisbee field. Like I have Black friends that are I consider to be some of my best friends, and we have not played in frisbee games together or against each other in probably like what 5 to 7 years now. Like frisbee was the reason that we were brought together, but frisbee was not the reason that we ended up staying together. Like they don't even live in the same state. They live in Indianapolis, like so, but we're still very, very close in that sense. But that was the like first thing that brought us together. And so once again, that just like realization, like, oh, you're here to play frisbee, awesome. Like we're best friends now. Like I don't know, like it just kind of like it once again, it just means a little bit more.
So I'd say I really like this question, but I've never thought about this even remotely. Um, I get along better with Black Frisbee players the first time I meet them, I would say, but it's because we just skip all the like weird stuff that normally happens when I first meet a Frisbee player. So like we get straight to Frisbee. So like the SLA guys, I was always really cool with them just because we got there and we were talking about Frisbee and like just doing it, and it was fun. Um, so I'd say that part of like the closeness, Antoine, you said like the camaraderie is huge. But then also like being Black in Ultimate, I feel like it's so easy to express yourself in Ultimate. Like always, like it's really easy just like because of how it's set up. So it's like super duper fun for me to like play frisbee and just be super duper free and like out there. So I'd say that's like the best thing about Ultimate and me being Black, I would say.
Um, I also don't know how to answer this question. I'm not sure how I've like embraced uh, being Black in frisbee because I have such a complicated relationship with race. I don't know. I think I mean I always really appreciate when I like meet younger players who again is like you know some version of like me being vocal or me like getting to play on certain stages has given them a face to connect with. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's like I don't Yeah, I don't. It's not like I get really like uncomfortable sharing that because I don't want it to come across as like, oh, I love having like fans say hi to me. But honestly, like it's like the moments like I'm at a clinic and they'll be like, oh, like you said this thing on social media, or like we met at this thing. I'm like, I don't remember, but that's like awesome, and like that then drives home like, I don't know, that it's in a lot of ways it's like the same thing of like I can't leave my race at the door when I enter frisbee, and like it's like the other side of the same coin where like that's like the really nice positive portion, and then that like feeds me like my spirits and like lets me be feel more free to be myself, and then it just like becomes this cycle where like we yeah, like the more I see her, the more like conversations I have like that, or the more conversations I have like this, I'm like, oh, I'm really not alone in this feeling. And then like recently, I've just been trying to leading to my friendships with my friends of color, and it like yeah, it's not specific to Ultimate, but just that feeling of like I don't even need to finish a sentence because like just the facial expression you have, I know you get it. Like that kind of like it's very subtle. It's like or like oh you're nodding at all the right places. Like oh like we're here, you know. So I think like I don't know if that quite answers that question, but that is a piece of like being an other that's been like such a heartening thing to embrace.
And this is where I will say, like, I feel like I have felt that as a coach. Because like once again, when I first started coaching, it was like, first of all, we didn't have enough for a guys and a girls team. It was just all together. And yeah, it was an all white team, but over the years it has gotten a lot more diverse, and like in that sense it like definitely feeds like me as a coach, because I'm like I must be doing something right, because like the kids that would never ever consider to play frisbee are now showing up. And maybe it's the fact that they hear me talking about it excitedly, because like usually it's not a completely new face, it's like a face that like I saw in my classroom or were friends with kids in my classroom. And I'm not even remotely trying to toot my own horn here. It's just more like when you see a team transform from an all white team to a kind of white team, like that's big. And so it's like, how can we do that more? Like, how can we expand that to be a bigger thing and a normal thing? And I think that's really what I've been kind of racking my brain about. But yeah, it's just also very reaffirming in that sense.
And I think like to finish off, I think a lot of people in the chat are asking, what can we as parents, as players, what can we do to include more people of color, Black people into the sport? Along those lines, what you're saying, Ms. Jackson.
The first thing, or like the main thing that has come to mind, because this is a question that I've been thinking about a lot, um, because in all honesty, I have realized that one of the easiest ways to get a team started at one of the predominantly Black and Hispanic high schools in Arlington would be to go to that school as a coach and or teacher. But at the same time, I'm like, why do I have to give up the position that I'm in order for that to happen? Like, there should be something else. Like, once again, this idea of I shouldn't have to be doing this alone. And I haven't felt like I've been doing it alone, but it's definitely like I don't want to give up what I have. Like, I love my school. I love the team that I've created and helped cultivate. I love my players. And so this is where I think, first of all, as previously said, yes, it's about like making yourself known in the community. I think it comes down to the fact, like, if you just like show up and say like, here's the thing that I think you should do, that is like historically that's a bad idea. Just don't do that. Um, but I think that it partially comes down to also recognizing that there are barriers. So don't look at this school or this set of players that are predominantly Black or Hispanic or people of color and be like, why don't they play Frisbee? Well, like, have you considered all of the barriers? Not just the financial barrier, but once again, like recognizing, like, in the grand scheme of things, like how many, especially Black males, imagine themselves as like big time rappers or NBA stars or something else that kind of has fit that mental niche. And especially like if you have spent your entire life playing basketball with the hope that you make it big, like LeBron James, that person is not just going to want to drop all of that to suddenly play Frisbee, where there's like literally no money. It's not even like soccer where you can make money behind it. There's no money in it. So why would you like immediately drop that? And so it's just remembering those barriers. Like, it's not just about money, it's the culture behind it. It is, what are they potentially having to give up to now suddenly play Frisbee, where, like, yes, we've talked about like what we've gotten out of it, but at the same time, there's not really an incentive other than like, oh, you might be like a better person because of it. Like, obviously you want that, but people can still achieve that in other ways.
Something personally that I've done when coaching and playing, recruiting kids at schools, to try to get more people to play, not recruiting just like one Black friend, like, because if you just have one person coming out, they're going to be uncomfortable, especially if they're the only person of color at the whole thing. So if you have a couple friends, recruit them all, like get everybody out there, get as many people as you can out, so that everybody's comfortable and everybody can feel good about what they're doing, and it'll just be a better experience.
I think Elise kind of covered all the things. One thing that I was thinking about is there used to be a track that I ran at that often the times I went overlap with like football practice, and just like there's like such a difference in like mood at like a football practice versus like, and I know we already covered this, but then I also think about like all the clinics and like camps and things I've been involved in, and there's a very much like a rah-rah, like pep rally kind of vibe to Frisbee. So that, you know, that might be that might be worth considering if you're trying to introduce what we've established as a very white sport in communities of color. Like, to Lisa's point, like there are cultural considerations. So you just have to work backwards, right? Like, I appreciate the question of like, from the perspective of like, we love the sport and we want it to grow, but in the grand scheme of things, if a person's really dealing with all those barriers, like how big of a priority is it going to be? Like, there has to be something in it for them. So, like, I guess maybe then that boils down to just like, when you're going into it, like your enthusiasm is great, but also just like put that in the context and like realize that's not the top priority. That may not be the top priority for people who are not already playing Frisbee. And then you have to kind of ask the questions of why, like, will they get something out of it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think those are great responses. And I think one thing to keep in mind throughout this is not saying that we should only recruit the people of color just because they are that. And I think there has to be, like Opi says, there has to be a dual benefit to that. The team has to benefit because that player might actually grow their skills, or they might actually learn a couple of things that they may have not been exposed to, rather than just saying, oh, we need to look good as a team, and we can't, if we don't have enough of these kinds of players, we're not good. And I think people should stray away from that and avoid those kinds of ideas. But I mean, all in all, I think those were the main questions from the chat. And I think, each one of you guys for showing up. I mean, personally, it's great to see bunch of Black athletes doing what they do and sharing what their perspectives.
Thank you very much. And so I know that, believe it or not, we're actually inching towards the 2 hour mark. So, I mean, once again, I could probably talk like for 3 more hours on each of these topics. And so this is where I guess like I will ask you guys as panelists, like, was there anything that you wanted to add, like a point that you had like way back and you were like, oh, I should make this point and just never happened, because like now's the time.
Yeah, I have one quick thing. A lot of times the Frisbee community will talk about ourselves as one big community, and we just need to realize that we have a lot of sub-communities within that. That was all.
The only thought that I have, once again, right now I'm in grad school and I'm taking 3 classes and they're all based in different subject areas. But one thing that I read recently that really resonated with me was talking about when we have conversations. When we have conversations, there is essentially a certain balance of power and energy. And if there is one person that is considered an authority figure or more knowledgeable, it means that this other person might have to work harder to meet them. And so this is where it really becomes important to kind of keep that in mind, because it is not always like the person's job to have to rise up, so to speak, to meet them in that. It's more on the person who is the original speaker to like come down from it. And I know that's like kind of a big concept, but it was originally mentioned talking about students who are English language learners. Like if you kind of put it all on them to explain what they mean and not help them out in trying to meet that explanation, then now you're putting it all on them and it's just causing them to feel frustrated and wanting to give up. And it makes the person not want to actually speak. But I think that can really resonate for a lot of different concepts, and a lot of different discussions, especially when we're talking about racism. All right. So, with that said, thanks so much, guys, for coming by and talking about this stuff with me. I am so glad that you were able to find time in your busy schedules. And also, once again, thank you for sharing your own personal experiences and things that you have gone through and you've seen. Because once again, this is really about getting conversations started, and hopefully changing things. So, with that said, I hope everybody who's watching is having a good night. Make sure that you share this with everyone. I think that anybody who has played a sport will really find this informational and really be able to take away from it, even if they have no idea what frisbee is.